Welcome to Behind the Facts, a podcast that focuses on shining a light on the individuals that work behind the scenes, curbing the spread of false and misleading information, and fostering a culture of accuracy. I am your host, Tipe Mailan, and I am joined by my colleague, Alphonce Shiundu, editor of Africa Check in Kenya. It is a pleasure to have you join us for the second part of our discussion today around fact-checking approaches during elections. Alphonse.
Thank you very much, Tipe. I am pleased to be here to be speaking with you about this important topic.
Alphonse, I just want to find out from you, in all your years of fact-checking elections, what has your experience been? I am quite certain that it's been a roller coaster. There have been some high moments. There have also been some shocking moments. Could you share with us what your experience has been fact-checking during elections?
So the experience during elections is the pace with which we tackle disinformation because it's a peak moment and there is usually a lot of false information circulating. The volume is just huge. It's humongous. It's enormous. And we try to deal with that in a manner of speaking where we tackle the disinformation that would be targeting opponents with political smearing. And then there is the disinformation around the tactics that the government will use to exaggerate its achievements or to sort of minimize its failures. That is the kind of environment in which we get in around election time. And my experience is that a lot of people, and this I would say from the experience in 2017, 2022, and partly in 2013 fact-checking elections in Kenya, it's that after 2017, when the fact-checking movement was growing, every organization, every NGO around election time fashioned itself as countering disinformation, fighting electoral misinformation. That was the kind of work they were doing. So you were getting a lot of people who were getting into the space, trying to fight false information. Some were doing it correctly, some were not. Some were biased, some were non-partisan. And political parties themselves had a very hard time in the sense in which every time we would fact check now as Africa Check and find that some of the things they have put in their manifesto was not based on fact or was inaccurate, they would accuse that we were working for the other side. And the other side, if we check their manifesto and found things that were wrong, then they would accuse us of trying to carry water for the opposing side. So that kind of thing for me is one of the ways in which we can use fact-checking transparently to just clean up the information ecosystem as we head towards elections.
I'm glad that you mentioned the manifestos. I was just about to say, you have a lot of speeches and manifestos, a lot of communication happening around election time. All of a sudden, all the things that weren't said are now being said. And it's important as well also to look out for and be cognizant of the information that you're exposed to. So, what are some of the things to keep in mind when approaching information, especially when it comes from political actors during an election period?
So for political actors, what we have learned over that decade of operating around the election sphere is that most of the misinformation would not happen in the official languages. In Kenya, that's English and Kiswahili. Most of it would not, especially the disinformation, would not be written down. It would be spoken. It would be in local languages. It would be done in rallies, in anonymous audio clips, in graphics with things that are there. And there's often lots of innuendo and dog whistling around contentious issues. And then that creates false narratives around important topics that you can only debunk fact by fact. So we usually end up with all these narratives which are false, but the building blocks, the factoids around which those narratives are built, most of the factoids are wrong. So it's either the data is plainly wrong, or the facts are being misinterpreted or misrepresented to give a certain picture. And you find that when these are repeated over and over in television interviews, in speeches during rallies, especially the ad-lib ones, the ones that are unwritten, that kind of misinformation circulates. We also have to worry about the platforms which become avenues for or spreading disinformation. So television, big deal, because it's video. There is an automatic public trust that if somebody speaks to a journalist, they are likely to be speaking the truth, given the assignment, the transference of the assignment of legitimacy and public trust that people have in media houses. So that is also one of the things that we worry about.
It sounds like it's very uneven terrain. It sounds like it's a mixed bag. And it's important for us to find ways to shield ourselves against misinformation and disinformation, as you've mentioned. And I'd like us to talk about pre-bunking for someone who's unfamiliar with what pre-bunking is, and also what it is as compared to debunking. But more importantly, how important is the ability to pre-bunk when you're interrogating information?
Yes, pre-banking is something a lot of people talk about. And I love that it's becoming mainstream in the sense that you're trying to counter something before it spreads. You have isolated the contentious topics. You have identified the disputed realities around which electoral narratives are going to be built. And then you provide accurate information in a way that addresses the information need before the information ecosystem is polluted. So educating people about how misinformation works, how disinformation works, telling them how to assess some of the claims, especially around opinion polls, interpreting those polls, giving them ideas about the number of voters, and even telling them like proactively that, look, guys, this is the kind of information that you will be seeing in the next few weeks as we head to election. That sort of builds some kind of muscle, some kind of critical muscle, or what's information resilience, where people become more aware, they become skeptical, and they are meter for detecting falsehoods or dubious content, as we can refer to it, becomes very, very acute. And so they can stop the false information before it comes out. So that's one of the things that we can do with pre-banking, and it's really, really useful. Just giving people the numbers of the voters who are going to participate, how to interpret what a valid vote is. You'll be surprised how some of these things are contentious. How to interpret the voting process, when people should expect results. All these things tend to reduce anxiety if the information is out there quickly, because these are the things that are exploited by politicians. If they see they're losing the election, they latch onto narratives about the number of people who showed up to vote, the number of votes that were spoiled or uncounted, what the poll said that they were ahead and now they are not winning. It means the elections have been rigged. So educating people about these things, that would qualify as pre-banking. It's just giving them the intellectual muscle, the smartness, the information awareness to be ready to expect some kind of pollution of their information feed and how to respond to that.
Thanks, Alphonse. And you speak about education. And if we touch on that just a little bit, I'm wondering as well as in terms of accountability, how do you hold political actors specifically if you found that the claim that they've made or the statements that they've made are inaccurate? How do you hold them to account? And also in terms of education, then at the same time, how do you find common ground to try and also educate them as well about the importance of understanding the potential harm of misinformation and disinformation?
This is the hardest bit, Tipe. The hardest bit about fighting misinformation around election time, because political actors are operating in a very volatile, very polarized environment, and for them, going back on something they said can provide propaganda content for the opposing side. And so, what we do to try and create that common ground among political actors is to give them the information, the source, and then having a conversation with them as we fact check or with their teams by telling them that, look, you said this, it's not correct. We found data. Here is the data. Have a look at it and then use it going forward. We try to make this process as gentle as possible. We try to use neutral terms. We try to make them understand that we have found some of their claims correct and some of them incorrect. And we are not simply cherry picking the kind of stuff that we fact check. We actually look at the important topics, what they are saying, and the potential harm this is likely to cause, and then we fact check that. Explaining the process of what we do, putting out ourselves with our processes, the evidence, and everything that we do to them, it makes it easier to have a conversation whenever we catch them or they end up putting out inaccurate information. That's the kind of way we use to try and hold public figures to account.
In the previous episode, we asked Lee and Valdez about what are some of the telltale signs that indicate that a political actor is most likely, whatever statement they're making is most likely not as accurate as it seems.
I'll take you back about the kind of misinformation that we've seen circulate around election time, and then from that, then we can look at the telltale signs. So when a political actor is speaking in English or Kiswahili to a mass audience, and suddenly they change to vernacular or they change to the local language that is only understood with the people in that area. Either they are going to do the political dog whistling so that they just give information that is understood by the people in that area, put them in a fertile place where they can now sow the seeds of disinformation around whatever issue. So land for Kenya where politicians switch to mother tongue and then they speak about all these people have stolen our land. Now, if I give you the Kenyan context, if somebody buys, you are allowed to buy land anywhere, but the ethnic communities have places or towns or counties where there is a majority or a homogeneity around the community that lives in a particular county. So anyone who buys land in that area either belongs to that community or some may not belong to the community. Now, those who do not belong to the community are talked about as outsiders. So whether they bought or did not becomes irrelevant. So it looks like they stole, and the willing buyer, willing seller narrative does not work. So for me, the signal that something is going to be said which is inaccurate comes at that point. Another telltale sign is when you see videos that are posted by politicians, and we had this case in 2022 where politicians, several, including a political party on their accounts on social media, put out a video, very incendiary. You would look at it and you would be like, yo, this actually needs to be condemned. Now, for them, they put a spin on it, saying that they are condemning the utterances made in that video. But the original video did not have the utterances as incendiary as had been put in the manipulated video, which the politicians of the political party were putting out. So anytime you see a video that makes you upset, makes you angry, that's one of the things that I have to look out for around disinformation. So pictures, videos, those that make as incendiary, or those that are likely to shape opinion about either it was soulful or it was deserted, my antenna goes very, very high to know that this could be potentially false information coming up.
Thank you for sharing that insight. I just want to find out if you have any words of wisdom for those who are tuning in about being careful about the information that they consume, and as well as any advice for fact checkers who find themselves having to fact check political actors.
I'll start with the fact checkers. The approach that when it comes to fact checking elections or countering false information around elections, the misinformation, disinformation that is there, just be very transparent about it. You're not doing the fact checking to embarrass the politicians. You're doing it to educate the public, because most of the times what we have seen is the politicians don't know any better when they are trying to put this information out there. They don't know the harm they are causing. They are just reaching into their toolbox and picking every tool that they believe will allow them to win an election. So blunting the tools that spread false information, conspiracies, and disinformation, fact checkers help in doing that. But you should do that in a manner in which you don't antagonize the politicians or you don't antagonize the supporters. Be gentle, don't be confrontational, be transparent about the data, share your working the way they tell us in the mathematics class. Share your working. That is for the fact checkers. For the people who, the electorate, the voters, the understanding is that around election time they will meet a lot of false information. They will be deliberately misled. They will be inadvertently misinformed. So in those instances, they just need to be skeptical about anything they see around election time. If they cannot verify something on their own, they can ask the fact checkers. But they should not trust the electoral promises that come out of politicians' mouths or from political actors without vetting these promises themselves. They should not accept the declarations of achievements or the branding of opponents and rivals as unworthy in whatever form, without actually looking at the building blocks that allow political leaders to make those conclusions of their rivals. So just have to be skeptical, think about the information, try to verify it. If they can't, talk to the fact checkers.
Alphonse, thank you. It was a pleasure to have you join us for today's episode.
Thank you very much. I loved talking about this issue, and yeah, thank you, Tipe.
Thank you, Alphonse. For those of you tuning in, be sure to like and share and follow us on all our social media platforms. I have been your host, Tipe Mailani, coming to you from Behind the Facts.